All right, hey everybody. So this is Josh Bruce, and today we're going to be talking about Shoop again. Just kind of looking at the diff from uh, the last time. This one's kind of a big change. This would have been a major version had we actually released it. So let's take a look. We got 15 changed files. So given how big Shoop is, which is not very, that's how I kind of know this is a big change. And it all sort of starts with these interfaces. So if we take a look at the Rapabool interface, this is the big one that hit the most code. And basically what the Rapabool interface was is I was getting really tired of having different types of initializers as well as different types of retrieval mechanisms. So basically, if you look at the left-hand side here on, what is this, esbool, and then, yeah. So basically we had the concept of esbool : init, which you initialize. And I didn't think that init actually communicated very well what was actually happening, which is that we were taking a PHP base type or some type of base type and bringing it into Shoop so that you could then play with it and go through the motions of complex data manipulation or data interpolation and data interpreting. And everything like that. Like init just wasn't covering it, and we had taken that from the Swift library initially, this concept of init. And the other part was is that every time I was coming out, I had to know what data type it was going to be, right? So if I wanted to get the result of the is same as comparison, I would have to say bool, right, to get it back to being a PHP true false sort of binary thing. And as you can see over here, when I initially started doing the Rapabool thing, it was basically like, wrap, we send in an array and we figure it out, versus wrap string, which, I don't even remember what this int count thing is. So, it was just creating some cognitive load I didn't think was necessary. And so instead, converted it to one static method that's public with that can take an infinite number of arguments, right? And so basically, as the implementer of the wrap method on your class, you can do whatever you want to do, right? And so it sort of allows you to create a custom constructor, so to speak. So that's the big change. So if we come back up here and now sort of start looking at it with that foresight, basically we can start seeing some of why the choices were made that were made. Now we did bring in the Illuminate support array helper methods, and this is put together by Taylor Otwell and the Laravel crew to basically help out Laravel. Well, we're obviously not Laravel, but strictly speaking, but basically what we wanted to do there was, or what I was using it for, is basically the flatten method, which basically takes if I'm remembering correctly, it'll take a multidimensional array and actually make it a single level array. So if you were to send in, say, something like, so this would be a 0, and then it would be a value of, say, an array, and the first index of that would be another array, and this becomes a 3-tiered array. And basically once we pass it through flatten, if I'm remembering correctly, it would end up looking more something like this. And it just makes it as flat as possible. And I could be wrong in my memory in what this does, because I actually took it out in future iterations, but we'll get there. And so here you can see that basically we're returning just a new array, and we just put the array in there instead of what is this string? If somebody passes us a string, let's convert it to an array, so on and so forth. We also did is empty, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So here you can see we brought in the Rapabool interface as well and converted bool to being just whatever arguments you wanted to, and we just double check to make sure that arguments 0 is set, otherwise we return true. That becomes our default, and we're still using the static Rapabool. And so then we come down here and basically do it that way. And I believe I left in static bool as a way, or Rapabool as a way to be backward compatible. Not that we needed to, but it's a good habit to kind of get into. So here we're just converting the init into a wrap, and then now we implement the unwrap. And I mean, we do get to delete some code or at least move it somewhere. So wrap, unwrap, wrap, wrap, wrap. I mean, most of this is just going to be wrap. We do put in the implementation of equatable, which is what allows us to do things like removing is same as and that sort of a thing. So, so there's the constructor, and we're wrapping this. So if you do construct it directly at this point, like if you were to do new ESInt, you would have to put a PHP base type in here, but if you actually go through the desired way to initialize, which would be int wrap, then you could start doing different things and have it interpret what you're going for. So wrap, unwrap, wrap, unwrap. Yeah, I mean, this is like just little tiny mosquito bites of changes that had to be done. So here we go. So this is comparable, which we also turned into, I believe, an implementation and an interface, because I was getting really heavy into interfaces, creating interfaces and the implementations for those interfaces. And they're nice from the perspective of if we had, say, common interfaces amongst PHP packages and things like that, that you could actually reuse those contracts, even if you don't necessarily reuse their implementations. And if we have the generic implementation, then you can reuse the implementation as well. And it becomes a nice way to compose your classes. So let's see. So we're bringing in Rapabool as well as equatable. This looks like a really complex wrap here where it's on range, so we have to be able to get the min and the max. But we are replacing this sort of init where you have min, max, and whether or not to include the last. And again, that's something from the Swift 5 library. So a bunch of wraps. And then we implement unwrap. And it looks like we have probably iterator, where we're also doing some wraps. And we're unwrapping, and yeah, so this is us trying to figure out how do we figure out if a range actually contains that number. And so you can see here we're still very much going with give us an eightfold Shoop object, not a PHP standard library or standard data type. So is same as, so just writing the comparison for that, bringing in equatable to ES string as well. So we're going to do the wrap here. I don't know why I'm pulling in this count. Oh, because it calls wrap string, and wrap string does that. And then, wow. Some of this happened so long ago that I actually can't remember what the choice was. Still converting over to being inside of Shoop when we're inside of Shoop. So basically, if you try to think of Shoop this way, basically it's kind of like a tunnel. And so when you're outside of the tunnel, you're definitely PHP, right? So just integers and booleans and regular strings and things like that. But once you go into the tunnel, you're in Shoop land, right? And there are certain methods that you're going to call that you can send arguments with, right? So like here we can send a string, and at this stage of the game, basically I was thinking anybody, whenever you were coming from outside, you were always passing in PHP, right? And the sort of problem that comes with that, or that started coming with that, is that there were times that I was messing with a Shoop object and I wanted to be able to pass it in, but I couldn't. I'd have to unwrap it, and then it would come inside and it would have to get wrapped again, and all these sorts of things. And so anyhow, but that was basically the idea, is like, so again, you're coming onto a tunnel, you go into the tunnel, and there are sort of these other tunnels that can sort of come into the flow of what you're doing as well. And then once you come out the other side and you say unwrap, then boom, you're back into PHP. Like everything that happens in the tunnel stays in the tunnel, so to speak. So anyhow, looks like we started the process of deprecating is empty, or we just moved it down. Yeah. And changed the implementation. So there's that. And here's equatable, and of course equatable had to be updated to use wrap as well. But yeah, you see how this basically unwrap, that's coming out of the other end of that tunnel. So what's nice about when you're trying to maintain type safety is basically PHP can check against anything that's in the class declaration. So you can put ESString as the precursor. So basically, like if we created, say, public function hello, and we said ESString, and we had an argument, and then we said ESString, basically the type system in PHP would look for ESString in the class declaration of this thing, and then before you return, it would check the class declaration, if there was one, to say, okay, that's an ESString as well. But we could also do Rapabool, right? And we could also do equatable and that sort of a deal. And so really trying to take or keep and maintain this type hinting going, and that's what we were doing sort of here with this equatable thing, is that if we're, and what that allows is for us to verify that we will have the contract satisfied, right? And so basically an equatable thing is going to have the ability to unwrap, and I suppose it would have been better, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that this be wrappable, not equatable, because this is the foreign construct that we're looking to make sure that we have, right? Because we're going to use these methods, and we need to know that those methods exist. Therefore, we type hint, or would type hint, with Rapabool. And I had a typo there, soarable. I don't know what that's about. Able to get soar, I guess. So again, Rapabool, right? Just getting down to those two methods. You wrap and then you unwrap and you're done. So obviously we had to update our tests. So we were updating the wraps, we were updating the equatables. Looks like here we were double checking that we were empty. Wrap, unwrap, like just wrap and unwrap everywhere. And this actually, was sort of a precursor to another change that we made that we'll get to, but basically trying to make this easier, right? Because you're always calling a method and then unwrapping, or you're even just instantiating this. Like if we were to do ES range wrap, right? This puts us into a position where PHP doesn't really know what to do with this object outside of its own context. And so you'd have to say unwrap, right, to basically put it back into PHP land. And basically I wanted to be able to do something different because doing it this way was kind of getting old, and we'll get there. So, and of course you can always look at the project now because it's public, but yeah, so just doing what we need to do. So yeah. All right, well, that's the end of all of the changes there, and it was, like I said, pretty extensive, but for the most part it was really just deciding two ways. Make it binary. You wrap and you unwrap, and that's it. Stop with the cognitive load and cyclomatic complexity of like, okay, well, if I pass in a string, I should use wrap string, and then like, because that's error prone. And then are we going to have a Rapabool? Are we going to have a wrap array? And that sort of a thing. And so, yeah, just wrap and unwrap, and let the implementer actually figure that out. So anyway, as always, thank you so much for making the time. I definitely do appreciate it, and I'll see you around.